I fully believe that for most of us, especially in the West, grounding in a quality of love and care as how we experience awareness is pretty important because we have so much healing to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've been so alienated from ourselves, each other, from the planet.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck podcast with David Nichtern on the Be Here Now network. My name is Michael Cammers, your host and monologist. And on behalf of everyone here at Dharma Moon and Be Here Now, we sincerely hope that this podcast finds you as well as can be, and we are grateful that you are joining us. Here at CSM, our guide David Nichtern discusses how to lead an integrated life involving spiritual practice, creative expression, and right livelihood with guests who embody and manifest these principles in their own life. And in this episode, we are very fortunate to have Rhonda V. Magee joining us. Rhonda is a law professor at the University of San Francisco and a leading mindfulness teacher and practice innovator with a focus on applying mindfulness to the hardest challenges of our times. She is an internationally recognized teacher, guide, and mentor focused on integrating mindfulness into higher education, law, and social change work. A prolific author, she draws on law and legal history to weave storytelling, poetry, analysis, and practices into inspiration for changing how we think, act, and live better together in a rapidly changing world. As both a law professor and a mindfulness teacher, Magee has been exploring the integration of mindfulness into teaching and learning and social engagement, including in support of personal and collective healing, activism, and leadership. She has written extensively on how mindfulness and other contemplative practices support engagement in the world in the face of the multiple interlocking challenges of our times, including climate distress, migration, political polarization, war, and their effects on us all. Along the way, she's become a sought-after keynote speaker and thought leader, inspiring others to explore the integration of socially engaged mindfulness and research and in applications inside schools, workplaces, communities, and beyond. I encourage everyone to check out Rhonda's TED Talk, in which Rhonda shares how mindfulness can support the work of diversity and equity as a tool for expanding awareness of the role of race in our lives, and as a means of deepening connection and experiencing meaning. I specifically appreciated her emphasis of shifting the cultural paradigm of color blindness to color insight as an important part of this path. Also, we collectively encourage everyone to pick up a copy of her very relevant book, The Inner Work of Racial Justice, and to spend some time at her website, rhondavmagee.com. That's RHONDAVMAGEE.com, which is filled with great information, guided meditations, and ways to connect with Rhonda, including information on her upcoming retreat at the Esalen Institute in June of 2024 entitled Come Together, a festival of intraconnectivity and spirit, which is focused on navigating the challenges of our current times through cultivating pathways of sacred connection and community. Okay. No intro monologue would be complete without a brief mention of upcoming programming at Dharma Moon, our mindfulness-based education platform and global community led by David. So please join us on Tuesday, May 28th from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time for a free online talk on the Zoom platform entitled Teaching Mindfulness and the Role of the Teacher. This is an info session for our upcoming 100-hour mindfulness meditation teacher training running from June 14th to September 8th, 2024, which is presented in association with the Tibet House. Join us and our skilled staff of teachers and mentors to deepen your own meditation practice, cultivate the understanding of the underlying principles of mindfulness meditation, all while honing your ability to communicate and transmit the power of this ancient practice humans have found beneficial for over 2,500 years. Also, I'll be on staff for this round of the teacher training, so bonus, we can hang out. Head over to dharmamoon.com for more information, and if you are listening to the podcast down the road, there's always lots of great programming to check out at the website, as long as causes and conditions should continue for such phenomena to arise. Also, we'd like to thank the Be Here Now Network for their collaboration and generosity in the production and distribution of this podcast. If conversations about topics like this move you, head over to BeHereNowNetwork.com and check out the ever-growing library of podcasts emanating ancient wisdom via this contemporary medium. Thank you, Be Here Now, for all your amazing work. Okay, that's it for the intro, folks. The table has been set, and it is now time for the main course. Episode number 52 of the Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck podcast, featuring Rhonda V. Magee and David Nichtern in conversation.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to another fabulous episode of the Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck podcast. Very special guest today, Rhonda V. Magee. And we don't want you to leave out the V because you won't find the right Rhonda Magee without it. So the first question I'm going to ask you, Rhonda, if you don't mind, is what does the V stand for?
Thank you, my dear David. It stands for Varette, Varette, which is the middle name my mother just found for me and gave me.
Has a slight French flair? No?
Is there yes, it does. I think the sound of that slight French flair is something that my mother was drawn to. All of my siblings and myself, we all have that in our name somewhere.
Wow. Okay. So you and I are newish friends. Introduced to a mutual friend, and we had one great conversation recorded for nobody but the two of us in our Akashic records, right?
Yeah.
But delightful, and we talked about music a little bit, about Dharma, about the the landscape of our culture at this moment in time. I have to admit, I was smitten by you and your perspective on life, and felt it was very accessible, very beautifully stated and clear. And meaningful. So it's a very happy thing for me that you're joining us for the podcast, so other people can experience your what you're into.
And it's a happy thing for me too, my dear, as well. Thank you.
Okay. So just to sort of flesh out a little bit about your work, your work in the world. How would you characterize your main thrust into this universe at this time and place, in that particular body, in this particular ecosystem?
I love that question. I would characterize my main thrust as kind of being a teacher and a lover.
Wow.
And, bringing that energy of love into the different ways that I have been, fortunate to be able to connect with people and share the Dharma.
Well, most of the attorneys that I know and work with don't lead off with that particular perspective. So we should let everybody know that you're a law professor.
I am.
You're a certified mindfulness teacher and author and presenter. And so love, you want to get right to the love.
Yes, I really do.
What do you mean by love, if you don't mind me asking? A lot of people use that word. Everybody's crying mercy, but they don't know the meaning of the word. You know that song?
Yeah. Well, so interesting. I mean, I think that the way, what I mean by love is, I think I'm pointing but first of all, let me just say the law professor in me is going to come out a little bit. So whenever I use any words, I am bringing awareness to the reality that words are only ever able to kind of gently point us towards something. And, you bring us as best as possible into that room where our imaginations can meet right? It's like, I'm going to be holding some notion about this and I'm going to try to find some words to point to it, and it will meet yours and we'll kind of roughly get on the same page, but also have some different understandings, I'm sure. In other words, it seems like words always have an irreducible amount of ambiguity to them, and yet we try the best we can to communicate, and thank goodness we can with them. So with love, I think there's all this ambiguity around. I mean, even more so than most other words. And we have this very, in our culture, we have all kinds of ways of thinking about it as very hallmarky or transactional, right? This quality we have between people that we know well, or we, have some particular special relationship with. But when I speak about it, I'm thinking about the quality that Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, Grace Lee Boggs, right? These, beings whose lives, in whose lives I find inspiration for giving a damn about the world, recognizing that, all of us are just these soft-bellied, carbon-based beings. We're here for a very limited amount of time. And, it's an imperfect sort of struggle / beauty for all of us. And given that we don't know how, for most of us, we don't know how long, right, we have. To me, love is the word I'm pointing to that captures the aspiration I have to meet, as best I can, this life with a certain kindness, a certain respect and awe, and this sort of willingness to do my little part in maximizing our ability to play and have, joy and our being alive together.
We're looking for bumper stickers this week, by the way. I thought love means giving a damn was a pretty good about the world you live in. It was a good bumper sticker. Yeah, I was working on one. I have one. I fought in the sexual revolution. If you come up with any good ones.
Right, and I'm wondering who won. Did you win?
Yeah, nobody won, actually.
Nobody,
as far as I can tell. But that is, I'm just going to share. I'm from the first thought, best thought tradition. Why can't you run for president of the United States? Is that possible at all? Is that even vaguely possible?
No, I don't think it's possible, partly because I don't think I have a sufficient love of political power. But I'd happily sort of, kind of be in conversation. I mean, to the degree that someone who's in that kind of very public leadership has the privilege of being, of a kind of a microphone, and then kind of almost this responsibility I think of leadership as giving us a responsibility to steward a kind of a public conversation and community, or a gathering around campfire when we need to address things that matter, right? I don't see myself doing that in a political sense, but I do love the opportunity to meet folks around a campfire, around things that matter. And that's sort of how I think of the work I do as a teacher.
With love comes just somehow spontaneous. The idea of power is almost a kind of,
yes,
ping pong, like if you were going back and forth. Power is such an interesting, I'm sure you've taught about power and a lot and contemplated it a lot.
Yes.
Any insight about that?
Yes. Well, I think of the two as actually interrelating in sort of interesting ways. I think of the most profound power that exists as the power of love, actually. I think of all of the kind of false, well, I won't say false, but there are more seductive, more public-facing versions of power arms and might and all of those classic ways that we think are often masculine ways presented in our culture of feeling ourselves as strong and powerful. But in my humble experience, and as I look across history and time, I think of all the many different ways that real change has happened. That we feel ourselves really being alive together, that we are inspired to create life together. And I really think that love actually is the, greatest power of all. And it's partly because of that we have created so many different ways in our culture of denying that, that particular form of power that we have access to, each of us have access to, right? We all have that inherent ability to love and to make a difference through love. And so part of what formal organized power does is helps to make us forget that we have this power. And so I think mindfulness, just to work our way back to that particular modality, is one of the ways that we can reconnect with our innate power and ground ourselves in that. And for me, mindfulness is, I can use the word love just as easily as the word mindfulness. I think the two are in beautiful ways.
It's interesting you're saying that today in particular, because at Dharma Moon here, we're launching a new course. We have our teacher training course, which is really based in mindfulness, but we're doing a next tier up, which is going to start with metta, loving kindness practice.
Yes.
And we're trying to frame it out in a way. At first, it's just going to be for the graduates, so it's going to be for people who already are grounded in mindfulness and also have become teachers to some extent, how to teach loving kindness. But I feel that is the coming Buddha nature is going to be accessed directly through the portal. And it's interesting historically, as I'm sure you know, Maitreya Buddha is the next in the garland of Buddhas. Shakyamuni was the fourth in the 1,000 Buddhas, and Maitreya, and people estimate 300, 350 years from now, something like that. It's a kind of level of time that is above my pay grade. And they already have a statue to him in India, a huge statue to Maitreya Buddha, and he's the bodhisattva of loving kindness. So in that iteration, do we skip over the mindfulness and just go right for the heart opening? Or do we need the platform of mindfulness in order to access loving kindness in a kind of with a certain level of precision and clarity? What would you say about that?
Well, I think of the experience of loving kindness as something that we can enter into perhaps without going through the doorway of mindfulness. In other words, I often think that there's as many different doorways into these experiences as there are moments, beings, right, expressions of life. So, and yet I know that as we're thinking about different ways of refining the teaching and training, it helps to be at least to have a rationale for offering it one way versus another. So I resist the idea that we must come through one doorway or another. But I do certainly see value in grounding in traditional teachings of mindfulness. And I think that often, as I understand it, what we in the West have translated as mindfulness could have equally well have been translated as heartfulness. In other words, there's this quality of heart that I think is always already embedded in the notion of mindfulness. So that hard boundary between what we call mindfulness and what we call metta, I'm open to a little bit more porousness. I fully believe that for most of us, especially in the West, grounding in a quality of love and care as how we experience awareness is pretty important because we have so much healing to do.
Mm,
You know, we've been so alienated from ourselves, each other, from the planet. We got so many different types of wounds. We're reinforced in notions of separation and unworthiness. So to be just aware in the way that I think has the capacity to really fully help us cultivate wisdom and a way of being in relationship to all things that that can help us move in the direction of bringing metta into the world in a more sustained way. I mean, I think that level and quality of awareness has to have, for most of us here in this time, a lot of softness,
mm.
a lot of kind of, heart, opening. And to me, the word love is appropriate for that quality of awareness itself. So I don't really draw too hard a line there.
Thank you so much for that answer. Yeah. Buddhism gets a rap in you know that I'm also hanging out in the kirtan community playing with Krishna Das, and they go
Yes.
right for the love sandwich there, and
Yes.
although there is an interesting, I like pith instructions. I
Mhm.
collect bumper stickers and pith instructions. I like
Yes.
to collect. And for example, my teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, said once, don't panic when things are going badly and don't relax when they're going well, which was a very interesting pith instruction to keep that tautness of attention and openness going, and not cater to one extreme or the other. But Neem Karoli Baba, Maharaji, who I know him through my affiliation with Ram Dass and Krishna Das, and they call me the Walla from another Mala over there, my nickname. And so I get to participate. I play guitar in KD's band and produce his records. And the instruction he gave to Ram Dass, which was love everybody and tell the truth. That to me is a solid pith instruction. And you know what Ram Dass famously said back? Do you know that?
I can't remember now, but sure.
He said, the truth is, Maharaji, I don't love everybody. So it's a little bit almost like you're in the koan exchange with a Zen Meister there.
Right.
Yeah. And then I would say, from where I sat, the journey of Ram Dass life was to learn how to love everybody authentically, genuinely, and he was pretty darn close to that at the end. And it didn't mean becoming sort of more naive or kind of disregarding things, but it meant opening fully from your side to what's happening and to the being that's there, and maybe not confusing the being with their own confusion. You don't have to add your confusion to their confusion.
Right.
So love everybody and tell the truth. How does that land on you as a pith instruction?
It lands well. I mean, and I'm pausing because I'm mindful of my own, struggles around both. I mean, I think of myself as having kind of been born with an orientation toward love. Because as a little girl growing up in Kinston, North Carolina, born, I proudly named the year as 1967. I was teased as a child for being what was called in my neighborhood and family tenderhearted. And, one who would cry at the sight of anyone else suffering. In fact, I had for a little bit a nickname called Bucket of Water because I would cry so easily.
BOW. Right.
Yeah,
Okay. Bucket of
right?
water.
Bucket
That's
of water.
hilarious.
That's what she's, a bucket of water. She cried, So I had to kind of toughen up a little bit. I think that's one of the reasons why I landed in law and I was trained as a military officer. I, did Army ROTC. There's some way in which to balance out this natural quality of care, compassion, empathy that I have felt since childhood. I somehow the universe led me down a kind of another path of dealing with its opposites. It's a kind of more structured way of being in, relationships to power and rational, the kind of whatever we might call the opposite of the loving heart, maybe the rational mind. I don't know, hyper rational mind. So when I hear, love everyone, part of me is just like, absolutely, yes, of course. Um, Tell the truth part, especially, and yet, I know it's hard, for example, before leaving to love everyone. It's hard to love the people who I see as doing harm in the world, maybe even intentionally rendering other people vulnerable to help make themselves feel better, or amass power in a certain kind of way, formal kind of power or external kind of power. So I see certain things as harmful, and it makes it hard for me to love folks who do that. But I do practice distinguishing, the being from the actions as best I can, and
Mm,
recognizing that, yeah, I mean, most people act in ways that are, it seems to me, act in ways that are not loving out of some misguidedness or pain, often
mm,
underlying.
mm,
So I work and practice around that, just becoming more clear that there is a distinction between that being and their actions. In terms of the truth telling part, though, I mean, I think it's just hard. I think when we were talking before, maybe we mentioned a little bit about some of the music that we love. And I may have shared with you that, for example, this year, last calendar year, like reconnected with my love of George Michael. And so, he, as one person that I'm thinking of culturally, as this person who had an impact on my life, so his music was a soundtrack of my life at a time. And then recently, I've just sort of been diving into some of the later stuff. And and in his story, there's a story of struggle around the truth of his identity, his sexual identity, his this, that. Um, I think being honest in the world can render us quite vulnerable. And so underlying the call to being honest is a deep courage and strength, a sense that I can, I will be able to handle some of the negative consequences of telling the truth.
mm,
And those consequences don't fall evenly on all of us. Some of us are already structurally and socially more vulnerable to
mm,
harm, to violence, to disregard, to not being able to take care of ourselves and our loved ones because of bias, because of oppression, because of all kinds of things. So, yeah, I think I love that. I think it's the right teaching, and I'm very mindful that it is one of those things that sounds simple, but is, it's it's next level in terms of the application of the Dharma,
yeah.
because underlying the ability to tell the truth is the strength that says, I will somehow, as my grandmother would say, make a way out of no way, get through all the stuff that will come my way or could come my way as I stand in truth.
Mm. You know, speaking of bumper stickers, I was in Costa Rica, as I mentioned, playing with Krishna Das, but I was also sitting in some with Deva Pramal and Nichtern, who are also kirtan singers of considerable repute and quality. And Deva's very sharp, and we have a lot of fun. She said, she was quoting somebody else saying, radical
Mhm.
honesty works pretty well most of the time. How's
Right.
that for a bumper
Exactly.
sticker?
Most of the time.
Yeah, works pretty well most of the time. So
Right.
yeah, this is And Uncle Irv, my uncle, who was a sage, great jazz piano player, said, you can't tell somebody something unless they have a place to put it, which I have also on the quotes on the wall. So how have you found, you are a truth teller. You are somebody who is trying to, as I see it, correct me if I'm wrong, in a way, realign perspectives for people so that there's more, clarity, more authenticity in in what they're saying, in public and private forums. So as such, have you found any secret to knowing when, skillful means wise, to address situations in a way that's going to get the result that you are hoping for, as
No, I
opposed to,
see.
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, when I hear you speak it's right. It's what's arising for me, or what's coming up is thoughts about the ethical underpinnings of mindfulness practice, the commitment to, acting in ways that minimize harm, which I've already alluded to a bit when I think about what love looks like in public, et cetera. That is also called for with regard to speech. So for me, everything kind of comes back to a commitment to my own efforts to be clear in terms of how I see things, and not get kind of caught up in some notion of, who I am in relationship to somebody else, where I need to be the one necessarily to say the thing that will wake up that person. I mean, I have a certain kind of humility around time and place and the limitations of me as a person who can speak a person into awareness. Right. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think it's just another place of practice to try and discern what is called for in a particular moment. And sometimes silence is actually the teacher.
There's the bumper sticker right there.
Right.
Sometimes silence is actually the teacher.
It is. It's like, I'm not necessarily the one needing to find the right thing to say to that person. I think that can be a little bit of a kind of a conceit that we can carry, that, if only we can find the right words. Well, there are many ways that people wake up.
So what about the flip side of that? I, who am like master of playing both sides of a ping pong game in my own mind, which is that sometimes you do need to be the person to say the thing. And there's a lot of, potentially fear or doubt about it. So you can't push forward, but you also can't hold back, so.
Yes.
Have you experienced times when you went like, I've got to sweat this out. I've got to put on my get up on my horse and be the one who rides into battle here?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, again, like I've been I'm 25 plus years in academia, where we, communicating and sort of sparring things out with words is one of the coins of the realm. So there have been times when publicly and privately, I've had to say some things that might have been difficult for another to hear. No, I just think that it is this process of discerning as best we can. Again, I love this idea that, people need to have a place to put the truth that you might want to offer. I sometimes think people are going to put it somewhere. They always actually do have a place. The question is, are they putting it in a place? Are they able to put it in a place where it can be held with some, openness, or is it going to be met with resistance? Is it going to be met
Sure.
with a denial, right?
Which is
And
very
so,
prominent these days, is it
it's
not?
very prominent. It's very
it seems to
prominent.
be people are saying things and it's just bouncing off people like a boomerang,
Right.
and whistling around the room, knocking over, Ming vases and
Yes.
grandma's china, and
Yeah.
and not only not helping, but kind of accelerating a process of dissolution or
Right.
disarray.
Well, that's sort of why I think cultivating the space within which truth can be spoken and received is such an important challenge or invitation of these times. Those spaces are so far and few between, right? We just, most places are so fragile for so many different reasons. They've been constructed in fragility right now, right? And in the kind of painful consequence of speaking the truth. So it's not, many places, workplaces, school classrooms, political venues are being structured in a kind of psychological vulnerability, right? And social vulnerability. You say the wrong thing, you could be, everything from what used to be called canceled to simply, or worse, to you may be vulnerable to some physical attack. So creating places where it's safe enough for us to be braver is, I think, important. But I think it's, again, I love their questions, David, because you're pulling us ever more and ever again to like what I consider to be, application of mindfulness, 4.0, right? These are, right. We practice, we cultivate these practices in our own time with our own commitments in our own ways, to me, for application in the world. And the world right now, the dukkha, the challenges, the kinds of suffering are so pervasive, and they're being reinforced in ways that are ever more crafty and subtle. So it's not just personal lack of wisdom. Well, it sort of comes down to that, but it's being reinforced by the devices around us, the technologies that make things hard for us to, move through the world without being emotionally triggered all the time and limited in what we can see, right? We're all being, reinforced in our narrow perspectives over and over again in a way that, is new in a way. Humankind has never had to face this level of intense, constant reminders, right? By everywhere we turn, we got a device to remind us of something to be afraid of, somebody to be angry at.
Oof.
So it is a really, really, it's a much harder challenge than is advertised, let's just say, to create a space within ourselves and between each other where truth, respect, holding each other, with a certain kind of awe. All of these are these kinds of things that I think are important for creating a container where some truth can be spoken and received. We are bereft of such spaces in our time. So how we can do more of that is one of the things that inspires me in the work that I do.
Well, and that is very cogent, because the creation of space is something that my teachers call the container principle. You can't serve tea without a cup. And the idea of what kind of space do we set up? Of course, at Dharma Moon, we work on this, we have online classes and we work on this all the time. How can we create a container which actually holds the spirit of what we're trying to present at the same time? And people are very fragile sometimes these days and sensitive. There's actually a diagnosis now called HSP, highly sensitive person.
Yes.
That used to just be like, oh, you mean Fred over there?
Yeah, exactly.
So people are, I think, and maybe I'm at the other end of the Ferris wheel in some ways, but it seems like young people in particular seem more at risk or something like that, or more prone to not being able to tough it out in a kind of way that maybe maybe you were trained a little bit. Okay, you got to ride with it, you got to weather it, and I'm concerned. I'm concerned with what I see happening.
Right. And I mean, I, as a law professor at a university for all these years, I certainly have seen changes in our young people in that generation, right? And the students who come through along these lines. Even law students tend to be more hesitant and more, they're literally, we're being told they're, increasingly likely to have diagnoses of anxiety, right? Of high sensitivity.
You're being told that by whom?
Oh, those who are counseling and psychological services people at our university and those across the country, right? So the data suggests that the generation of young people who are entering college these days are more prone than a prior generation to enter with diagnoses of anxiety. Now, is that the consequence of people getting diagnosed more frequently today than they did a generation ago? Or, what are the many inputs to that? We don't know. But however we explain it, it means you have many more students who come in the door saying, I have anxiety, I've been diagnosed, I'm going to need, accommodations and support for this or that. You have law students who are not comfortable sharing their perspective and being in either this kind of rich conversation where you tell your story, I tell mine. There's more, people are just more guarded, the young folks in these classrooms. And it is something to really pause and reflect on. Because again, like as you were saying, I think we too were of a generation where we were it was a little different. I think we were acculturated to a little bit more of a toughness around how we move through and deal with things. The temptation is to say, well, what's going on with the young folk is a bad thing, right? That they shouldn't be that way because we weren't, maybe, or we can see the benefit of not being that way. But I don't know, if there isn't also some way that these higher degrees of sensitivity aren't just simply, a sign of some kind of shift, evolution that is part of what we have all been wanting. Because part of what I think this time is calling for, this post-pandemic time, this time on this side of this movement toward mindfulness and awakening being more pervasive, these practices being more pervasive, we are seeing some of the ways that many of our cultures have trained us in, a distance from our hearts, and trained us in a kind of a fungible, like a way of thinking of each other that reduces each other to our resumes or, what we can present outwardly. And so there's something, I'm curious about this moment. I'm really curious because I do think in some measure, what we are seeing, and we're seeing diagnosed as high sensitivity and maybe anxiety, it's really a consequence of a generation of permission to be yourself that in ways that we weren't given. And I think we're meeting this generation that really grew up without all that permission is meeting this generation that has been granted it. And so that, the meeting point can be a little challenging for all of us. But I'm curious about that meeting point. I think there's something for all of us to learn when we come together across lines like this.
Beautifully stated. And intergenerational phenomena, for lack of a better IGP or whatever you want to call it, is an intriguing part of being alive, because you walk through the stages You remember the Sphinx? I forget. Was it Odysseus or somebody? The Sphinx gave a riddle, which is what walks on 4 legs in the beginning, on 2 legs in the middle, and 3 legs at the end. You remember that?
Just vaguely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oop, I think we lost your audio there. Maybe.
Can you hear me now?
We have a little glitch.
Okay. Hold on for 1 second. Are you still?
Yeah. Now we're back.
Okay, good.
Yeah, somehow the connection got.
Okay.
So,
See if I can.
it's good now.
Okay.
I'm hearing you fine. Yep.
Great.
So, yeah. So, that was the question to pass through. You had to answer that question, and do you remember the answer?
I don't remember this. Yeah.
What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening is human. Because like your baby, you're crawling on all 4s. You're growing up, you walk on 2, and then you add a cane as you're getting older. So, we'll all have that arc. And then if you get older, you get to see all 3 stages of the arc. And so your reference point is different. And how much, it seems to be our form of continuity is we have independent continuity, like the continuity of your consciousness as an independent traveler, but also how you're interfacing with the evolution of your society, of your family, of your species. And in that case, you're part of a fabric of something that's bigger than you. Do you have a sense of like intergenerational? Is that a big part of your thought process?
It has to be partly because of the work that I do. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, now we're good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think because of the work that I do as a professor, have been doing. Yeah, I mean, it's more part of the place where I feel like my practice has given me, grist, you know, because as you say, yeah, I engage in my own personal practices and then go out into a world where, for most of the past 25 years or so, a good chunk of that work, or that, the work that I've done has, given me this privileged opportunity to meet young folks who are in their, mostly in their 20s. And, as I continue to age and then keep seeing the 20 somethings right there, of course, getting younger and younger relative to me. But yeah, just learning, from those experiences, being enlivened by those experiences, has really been just a part of my personal practice. And, it's been part of the joy of my life, actually.
Yeah.
I don't have my own children either, right? So
you do or you don't?
I do not.
You're not. Okay.
And so partly because I don't have my own children, the time that I spent in these classrooms has really been important because, one of the things that, at least in my experience, when you don't have your own children, there's so many things that you don't have reminding you on a day-to-day of change and of the generations and of, our place relative to, and also there's something about, having a group of young people go through a process and then graduate, and in another younger group, it can sort of leave me feeling a little bit in a sort of an odd place where I feel like I'm not necessarily getting older. Because if I had this child growing up with me and I could see this child growing up, maybe be reminding me in a certain way that just sort of seeing students come and go in a cyclical fashion, I could delude myself, oh, we're all beginning again. But yeah, it's been this really interesting thing to be mindful of intergenerational movement and to have this awe that can apply to all the levels of our experience, including this experience right now of this, me as a woman of a certain age, right? And then discerning how to be in relationship to all the things that are coming up in this body and the arc that I'm able to look at and draw on, given, the 56 years I've been on the planet now.
Wow. And of course, by me, you're a youngster. It's funny how it's all relative.
It's all relative.
It is literally all relative. So remember Cat Stevens' song? Forever young, what will you leave us with this time? Oh, very young, what will you leave us with this time? You're only dancing on this earth for a short while. And, I sing that. Of course, I'm entitled as a grandpa. I can burst into song and do stuff like that.
Yes.
And everybody goes, they just roll their eyes and keep doing what they're doing. But, yeah, you look and you go, what will you leave us with this time? And you are helping to shape their thought process. I'm sure they love you. I can't even imagine how lucky they must feel to have you as a teacher. And do they come and sort of seek mentoring from you as well as the kind of professional context in which you're teaching them? Do you mentor students as well?
I mean, I have over the years for sure. Yeah, in a whole range of different ways. From that transition from whatever kind of way we had of being in the world to being a lawyer, thinking like a lawyer, right? Many people, a subset of folks, my students have come to me over the years, sort of like deer in the headlights, like how do I, move from being this sort of creative, artistic, sociologically minded person, maybe, as some of them see that I have a little bit of that in me, and yet I'm in law. Like, how do we do this? Like, how do we move from this world to this more, let's say a different way of thinking that we are socialized to do as lawyers? So there's always been that. There's a subset who are seeking support for straddling different kinds of social worlds. Recognizing that I am a person who grew up, first generation college, relatively impoverished, sort of, and have managed to move into a different kind of world and social location. And I think of that as a straddling set of experiences, straddling two worlds, or moving between different worlds. And students of all different backgrounds, whether they're immigrant students, whether they're white, male, gay students, let's just all different backgrounds who see something of the person who has managed to straddle different social locations in what they see me representing in that classroom, and they come to me for support. I have mentored students in various ways over the years. I think more than anything else, it's been around helping them stay in touch with their tender-heartedness, even as they learn this formidable way of being that legal education is meant to offer. They sort of see something in that in me, this ability to stay in touch with my heart with compassion, and also an ability to help people connect across lines of real and perceived difference and find a way together to join in circle around that campfire. Around things that matter. And so they come to me for a little bit of support in that as well.
I noted that that phrase, real and perceived differences, on your TED Talk. You mentioned that. And that is such a cool, way of framing without poking, but, if you're ready to hear what that implies, that's really a cool phrase.
Right.
Real and perceived differences.
Exactly. When people are coming at different places when they hear you trying to open that door.
Yeah, perceived differences is a big, big deal, especially for us as Buddhists. We go like, lately I've been thinking, what, if anything, is outside of the realm of perceived or perception? Like, is anything actually happening at all? Have you ever had moments like that?
Well, yeah. Anything real. And actually, in my teaching and my experience, the answer generally is not that much.
Not that much. Yeah. There was a Buddhist newspaper, and their byline was, "Nothing happens and we report it."
I love it.
Yeah. Well, I would like for our people sharing this podcast to know how to get to access you as a writer, a presenter, a teacher. Is there anything you could share about what you have coming up where somebody could say, wow, she's so cool. I'd like to go take a course with her, XYZ. Is there a course coming up? Is there a book coming out? Is
Yeah.
there a workshop that you're about to do?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. Well, so I've been working on a project that's right now got the sort of working title of The Roots of Well-Being. Um, and so it's got a version of that is in a course that I'm making available on through my website, um, called Deepening the Roots of Well-Being, actually. Um, yeah, we're all trying in our various ways, leaning into these practices to support ourselves, but also to support our ability to help others around us access their resources for bearing up and being, yes, we use the word resilience, but really just being alive and as well as possible during all the changes that we're up against right now. So deepening the roots of well-being is a way I'm framing it. I'm working on a book that again has that same working title. We'll see what it ends up being. I haven't, we'll see if it ends up being that title. But those are the kinds of things I really am always these days seeking to explore ways of making our personal commitment to practice and awareness and love in action, um, really allowing that to support us in meeting each other and helping each other in whatever ways we can through this time. And so, yeah, you can find me online through my website and different places, sharing what I'm learning along the way.
And yeah, let's direct people to the website for specific instances of being able to connect. So the website is Rhonda V Magee.
V Magee, Magee.com.
Okay, so everybody, don't forget the V today. That V is going to be important. Verret. And I am tempted to, part of what I'm into is like just connecting with people through these media of the podcast and through the media of the teaching forms, and then cooking. Oh, that's nice. You got it. You brought a nice piece of this, and so Dharma Moon. I would love to invite you to do something someday with Dharma Moon, some kind of program or such. And then the other thing is, if you write the lyrics for Deepening the Roots of Well-Being, I will write the music. I'm offering you that in public, in front of everybody, that we'll write a song together called Deepening the Roots of Well-Being.
Let's do it. I mean, because as you know, we haven't talked about it very much here. It's oh, thank you. And we haven't talked about it very much today, but yeah, I have been in this course and in this book and in this time, leaning into music and song and writing a little bit of small little songs. I think of them almost like nursery rhymes.
Yeah.
But I have been bringing a little bit of that spirit of lyric and music and movement, really, the different ways that movement speaks to us into my work. So yes,
awesome.
I'd be honored to co-author, co-write, co-play, play with you in those ways.
Wow. And stranger things have happened. I just want to say this is how when maybe at my memorial service, they say his entire life was unintentional. It just was kind of an accident that kept happening. But we call it tendril in the Tibetan tradition, which is auspicious coincidence. There's a whole chapter in Creativity, Spirituality, Making a Buck about tendril and how significant a driving force it's been for me personally. And I think once people lean into a practice or that kind of more open space container that you were talking about, tendril fires in that space. It kind of, you leave room for auspicious coincidence and connections to occur. And a lot of it's happening right now. There's some things that I feel just talking to you that other conversations come into play. And I'm sure, we all have those thoughts about, wow, wouldn't it be great if these two people could talk about X, Y, Z? So yeah, it's definitely, you are somebody who inspires confidence and trust. And this is rare. This is not that common. People are promoting their things and so forth and so on. But you feel like somebody who is actually open in a genuine way towards receiving and giving it from the heart. And this is, clearly a tribute to your practice, to your being. And I think we're all trying to light that fire up a little bit more and recognize it in each other. And a lot of things you've said today, I'm going to take to heart and really think about. So my gut is it'd be great to share you with everybody I know, if it's possible to do that. And the podcast is a way to do that, but other ways too. Yeah.
Thank you, my dear. I mean, it's an honor, really, just to hear this reflection, because, I do think that I am growing in my capacity to really, just be who I feel in a way I was born to be or, meant to be. And, as I already have alluded to, I was that caring child.
Bucket of water.
Yeah, who grew up in a world where there are a lot of fearful people who were maybe not naturally as empathic or empathetic or not naturally as able to feel compassion for other people. And so being able to both recognize that some of this for me is kind of innate, or some I have had an orientation that has been supported by the practices that I found in the teachings, but that, there's some marriage between whatever orientation I have in these practices and that other people also have orientations, which means that, I can't assume that how I am is necessarily how others. So it's really helped me with being both humble in a certain way, but also a little bit more capable of articulating or sharing across these differences in the service of, making a home where we can all, kind of feel our way toward the, whatever ways that we can thrive more genuinely together. So thank you for just naming that you're feeling some way in which something that I'm offering feels availing, feels like something you'd like to play and join together. I love this opportunity to connect with you as well.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll be posting this podcast, and everybody. Is there a way for them to reach out to you? Is that impossible if somebody's inspired? Is there like can they tune into the website and say, hey, I'd love to connect with you about XYZ here?
Yeah, and of course, email. You can find me very easily on the socials as well. I'm very available. And I think I'm going to maybe experiment with using YouTube a little bit more this year. So many things may happen in the way of ways of connecting, but certainly through the website, you can find me, email me, and I'd be happy to connect with folks. This is an aspect of the joy of being alive that I really am aware of.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this, brief but pithy encounter. Hopefully it's, e pluribus unum, one among many. And, we'll look forward to catching up with you again soon, having you back on the podcast again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, there you have it. Episode number 52 of the Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck podcast. We would like to send a deeply heartfelt thank you to Rhonda for joining us. I personally was instantly moved by her warmth and clarity personally, and I'm confident all of you listening felt the same way. Thank you, Rhonda. And please be sure to head over to rhondavmagee.com to connect with her and her work further. Also, a deeply heartfelt thank you to all of you, our listeners, for joining us on this journey. We hope that you enjoy listening to this podcast as much as we enjoy making it, and these conversations are beneficial for you in your life. We encourage everyone to like, share, comment, subscribe, and rate the podcast on whatever platform you are receiving us on, as this will help us spread the word about the podcast and do better work for all of you. Connect with us on social media at Dharma Moon Official for more updates from our community, and be sure to head over to BeHereNowNetwork.com for more illuminating podcasts. That's it for today, folks. Again, thank you for joining us, and may you be safe, healthy, happy, and at ease. All the best.